Shalom Uvracha to all of our viewers from Yerushalayim. Zachariah Sprung speaking. And today we should like to speak about just how high is the high risk to part of our Jewish population. We're all familiar with the high risk, but just how high is this high risk? Of course, we're holding before the holiday of Shavuos, which commemorates the giving of the Torah. And on many occasions, when we celebrate or we feast a certain institution or individual, it happens to be an anniversary of an institution, a distinguished institution. So we like to inquire about the welfare of that institution or the welfare of that individual. Exactly what is the state of this institution that has existed for many, many years? How is it faring? How is it functioning? Has it kept the value with the passage of time, or has part of the value and relevance faded with the passage of time? Of course, we'll have speakers that will speak about the ancient glory of the institution and what they accomplished in the past. But nevertheless, it might be, if we were to focus our attention on the present, so perhaps we would come to the conclusion that the institution has lost part of its vitality. And as we celebrate and feed the Torah, Zman Matan Torah, the holiday of Shavuos, so we could also inquire exactly about the state of the Torah. How is the Torah faring today by the overall population? Baruch Hashem, thank God, the Orthodox and the extreme Orthodox are faring pretty well, at least statistically. The secular part of Judaism has drifted totally away from Judaism. A lot of efforts, massive efforts to bring them back have not necessarily been successful. But we're not speaking about these clearly defined elements of Judaism, the sector of the religious, Haredim as they're called, or the secularists. We're speaking about a very, very defined, narrow part of the religious population. And the question is, does, for this limited Baruch Hashem group, does the Torah B'chlal function? Is it still functionality? Or perhaps it lost its vitality in the shadows of the tremendous strides of modern culture, of modern civilization, and the real difficult trials and tribulations that this group undergoes. So, to start the discussion, and this is more or less of a discussion, usually discussion is more of a dialogue, but here it's more, I mean it in a colloquial way, even though it's like a monologue, but it's basically a discussion. Recently, one of the very great individuals of our generation, is a top member of Arachim, and he himself has brought in the tens and tens of families back to Judaism. He himself was a very distinguished Talmid Chacham, gave up learning, and devoted himself to making, as it were, people that were even in kibbutzim, totally had no idea what it is to be a shomer Torah mitzvahs, totally lost. And Baruch Hashem, he brought him back. He's a very, very well-known individual in Arachim. So he told us the story, and it concerns us directly for a simple reason that one of the participants happened to have been a student of ours many, many years ago. So he told us that there was a Yiddish mama, a Jewish mother with 7 children, called him up, and she said that she saw in one of the newspapers an advertisement that this individual was able to bring back into the fold husband and wife that had gone off or knew nothing about Judaism. And this made an impression on her. And she has a major problem and she would like to discuss it with him. So he said, please discuss it. On the contrary, maybe we could be of help. So she told him that she's a Yiddish mama of 7 children. The oldest, I believe, was 14. And she comes from a very distinguished Hasidic home. Her husband is also Hasidic. She comes also from a Hasidic home. They, from their youth, have a major problem. It's difficult for them to conduct a normal life under the compulsion of Torah. They look at it as an albatross around their neck, a burden upon them, and from time to time, they get an emotional energy to just remove the yoke of the Torah. Too many restrictions that contradict what they understand is have a good life. They have their ideas of what they want to do, and many times they are simply pushed back and thwarted by the mitzvahs of the Torah. So there's a conflict, there's a clash, and lately it's getting very, very difficult. Unfortunately, she said, my husband has the same difficulties. So this individual of Arachin asked her very simply, the way I understand from you, it's really a difficult situation that you're in. The restrictions, limitations actually disturb your normal lifestyle, and you can't have any happiness due to the restrictions of the Torah. So why don't you just give it up and live a good day the way you understand a good day should be lived? Pursuing pleasure, hedonei, no restrictions. Nobody will now try to limit whatever you decided is a good life, whatever you decided is a life of pleasure. If you want to replace the Torah morality with your own morality, so why don't you just do it? You can replace God. If you feel the Torah and God are obsolete, make up your own code of morality and simply renounce the restrictions of the Torah. So she answered him and she said she would do that. However, she's terribly embarrassed and ashamed that her parents and her own children would not be able to tolerate such a decision on her part and a total change of lifestyle, that they will not be able to tolerate it, and they'll, God forbid, be stricken with who knows what. Anyway, he said that he understands the situation and he'll send his recordings, and he would like to hear what the feedback will be after you hear the recordings, right, of his shiurim that are directly relate to these type of individuals. Of course, he was totally shattered, demoralized. Difficult for him to put himself together. And when he told it to us, we were broken, like broken potsherds. The Seres on this, but totally devastated. And as we discussed it, so we tried to understand what would be a root cause of such a downfall of a family, 7 children, a Yiddish mama. Very difficult to understand. So apparently it would appear, after analyzing the situation, that if he would have asked her, he did not, but it could be that it would be appropriate to ask her after she answered the first question, what is the basic difference between a human being and a biological being? Of course, the answer is, she would have also given this answer, a biological being does not know, has absolutely no knowledge of Tov Ra. He doesn't have a conscience. It's not transcendental. He can't distinguish between good and bad. And therefore, he can simply tear asunder another animal, another biological being, because he doesn't know that it's the wrong thing to do, because he has no idea what's right and wrong. We understand that murder due to our consciousness, and we have an intellect. We're told there's laws in the world. There is a code of morality that was given by the Torah. We're speaking about Jewish people, of course, that forbids tearing asunder somebody else, hurting somebody, surely maiming him or killing him. So perhaps it would be better to be a biological being and not to be a human being. After all, a biological being also exists, does whatever it wants to do, has absolutely no worries for their young. And here we have a woman, a Yiddish mama of 7 children, that doesn't feel responsibility to raise them as Jewish people, as Jewish children, according to the tradition of Judaism, because of her weaknesses and because she wants to cast off the yoke of Torah mitzvahs, and the only thing that's keeping her back is embarrassment for her children, shame vis-a-vis her parents. Best thing to do is just to get rid of the yoke. Live the way you want to live. Do whatever you want to do, and you'll have no worries. We know a Yiddish mama, more than a different mama, more than a different mother, more than a secular mother, is interested and worries about the education of the children. That she go the traditional way. She worries to marry them off. And Koheles states this as a fact. Yosef Das, Yosef Machov. The more Das a person has, the more knowledge he has, the more knowledgeable he is, the more feelings he has, the more he experiences with his heart, the greater being he is. So of course, Yosef Das, Yosef Machov, he has more pain and suffering because he realizes he has a responsibility due to the fact his intellect mandates this, his experiences and his heartfelt knowledge mandate this, that he should take care of the children. Worry for them, marry them off, raise them properly. Yet no one that we know who is a human being that was granted intelligence, and a Jewish person as well as a Gentile, was created b'tselem Elokim, in the divine image. He has tremendous kairos, tremendous powers and strength of divinity. He understands transcendental morality, and we don't know anybody that would want to simply divest himself of all of his human qualities and simply become a biological being with no worries whatsoever, without knowing what's good and what's bad, no responsibilities, a good life. So the conclusion of this premise is a very simple conclusion. It's like Abele Lopian always said. What is the difference between the biological being and a spiritual being, which we call mankind in general? By Jews, we know Vayigba Liboy B'darkei Hashem. We have freedom of choice. Everyone has freedom of choice, all of mankind. But the Jewish people, there's a special dimension that should be stressed, emphasized immensely. So Rabbi Lopian once asked the Bacha, how would you define Bechira Chavshis? So we said Bechira Chavshis is the ability to do what you want to do. So Rabbi Lopian said, you're absolutely right. That is the freedom of choice that an animal has. Because the animal knows nothing about right or wrong, knows nothing about morality, immorality, what's rational, what's irrational or non-rational. He has none of these properties. So that is exactly what he has. He has freedom of choice to do whatever he wants to do. And he does that. However, B'tselem Elokim, and every human being a primitive person of millennia ago, or even a headhunter in the Amazon has freedom of choice. And what is freedom of choice? It's a charismatic ability, a divine gift, not to do what you want to do and to do what you do not want to do. Because even though we have divinity and we're created in the divine image, there's a constant conflict. It's part of a built-in schism that man was born with. And that is why there's frustration and anxiety, because in this constant conflict and clash between the nefesh habahamis, like the Rambam says, the biological being that is full of all the biological urges and drives of a biological being like animals, also is angelic, divine image he was created in. So this angelic and animalistic nefesh, the nefesh hasichlis and the nefesh habahamis are in constant clash every second. And the person has that unique ability not to do what he wants to do, that's the nefesh bahamis, and indeed to do what he doesn't want to do, he can conquer with his angelic strength and power. He can overcome his natural urges and drives, and he does not have to do what those urges and drives lead him to. The Jewish people, when they accepted the Torah originally, so the Gemara tells us something remarkable. The Gemara says that the Jewish people, when they said, so Rebbe Lezer in Shabbos Peiches told us, when Klal Yisrael were Magdim, in other words, they gave precedence to Nasa over Nishma, a Baskol, a heavenly voice exclaimed, "Who divulged to my children the secret that only the heavenly angels who are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're close to the divine presence, respond to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's commandment." So the Jewish people were compared in their response to the Torah to the angels above, and therefore they deserve 2 crowns. Nasa v'nishma. So the Beis Halevi explains, what does Nasa mean? It means an unqualified, unquestionable obedience to the Torah, a total surrender and submission of one's will to the Torah. Nishma means after this heroic, courageous, complete obligation of obedience, without any doubt whatsoever, complete surrender to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it indicates a tremendous willingness to study the Torah, to know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us, and accept, after we learn the Torah, everything that we learned, correct, unconditionally. In other words, the study of the Torah will enlighten us, illuminate us exactly what the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. And this response of the Jewish people evoked great excitement in heaven, to the extent that the Baskal, the heavenly voice, came out and compared the Jewish people to angels. Only angels, without hesitation, without reflection, and with complete enthusiasm and love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comply with his wishes. And that's the level that the Jewish people were able to achieve, the highest level of all, the level of angels. They realized, like the Gemara says, Tumas Yisharim Tamchem, their innocence, their purity, their pristine soul, and accepting the Torah unconditionally without even asking what it consists of, will bring them a great joy and tremendous successes in this world and the other world. This they understood with their intuition, even they might have not understood it with the regular senses. So this is exactly where the Torah stood so many years ago. And now we're dealing with a case, a concrete case, 4,000 years later, where they were given, two individuals were given a proper education. The best schools came from Hasidic homes, distinguished Hasidic homes, where the Torah was fulfilled with a warmth, with a dedication. How is it possible? And this is according to this individual that we spoke with. So he told us it's not an isolated case. We do not know how bitter the situation has become, especially after COVID, where people were not able to go to school, boys and girls could not go to school, and to keep busy. Unfortunately, they were exposed to the outside world, where many of them became fascinated with, and it became something which they connected themselves to it, and it's very, very difficult to extricate them from it. It's a difficult situation. We're not going to go into all the particulars. So this is a matzav of Noira Noiroyis. What exactly went wrong? Why are we holding in this situation? So it would appear, in our opinion, that without going through the texts that deal with this, Chovos HaTalmidim discusses it, a very important book, but we'll not go into the depth of it, just more or less the principles. The period of time that we're learning with our children and the context that our generation finds itself. So the first and foremost that has to be taught to youngsters is that their humanity, their spiritual personality will express itself in knowing why we are struggling and fighting. Of course, it's a clash and conflict. Adults have it too. We all have it. Between our values and the values or lack of values of the outside world, which today we are so exposed to through the media and the newspapers and the advertisements, is just overwhelming. But the children have to be taught. What is the reason why we're struggling? What is the reason that you have to exert the angelic aspect of your personality to overwhelm the physical drives, the physical attractions that are unfortunately not wholesome? Of course, the children and all the youths realize that it's a tremendous struggle. After all, they come from Jewish homes. They fall away, but they come from Jewish homes. But we do not emphasize the greatness. You're a greater gibor if you resist the temptations. You don't fall in. Then Napoleon, then Alexander the Great. You're a great hero. You've struggled and you have become triumphant and victorious. And we have to emphasize the importance of that. And what was the triumph and victory? That you became one step closer to being a spiritual individual, which is the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us into this world. We were created with a divine image, but that's a challenge to reach. It's only a potential, and we don't emphasize it because we expect it to be natural. And if it's not natural, something goes wrong, they don't do what's expected, they're criticized, vilified. Very good. But we should not have waited to the crisis. We should have made sure that that there won't be a crisis. And this is what is important. And it has to be taught to children, the youth, that even if you're not successful, but if you want to succeed, and you succeed 10% of the time, so it was worthwhile to come into this world, live 120 years for 10% success, because the temptations in our generation are overwhelming, especially for the youth that are exposed to it, and they have the means to achieve it. 10% is worth it. And we have to realize that this is a constant struggle. A response has to be made. And it's interesting that Rashi, in Parshas Mishpatim, when he explains a very esoteric pasuk, states the following: Sheishes yomim tasa masecho, uv'yem hashvi tishbois leman yanuach shochem v'chamarecho v'nofesh ben amoscha v'ager. What's relevant to us is the pasuk states, 6 days may you do work. The seventh day, you, every Jew, shall rest. And your ox and donkey shall rest as well. So Rashi brings down the Gemara. What does it mean, Laman Yoduach Shecha v'chamarecha? That your ox and donkey should also rest. They rest like you on Shabbos. They understand what Shabbos is. Yom Menucha, Matona min hashamayim, Hashkeit vovetach, Yismechu v'malchuscha, Shemish av'kerioine, Gam mekashe shvi. They don't understand this. So what does it mean? So Rashi says, unbelievably, Ten lo nayich, you are to give him rest. Shacha v'chamarecha, the man yoduach have to be given rest. And what is that rest? That he should go out, break out of the corral, let him loose, and he should be toilesh. He should simply eat all the grasses of the karka, of the land. Maybe not. Maybe it means that he shouldn't go out and be toilesh asabim, because to uproot grass is a malacha. So what would be the eitzah? What would be the alternative? Yachbi shenu b'toich habayis. You tie him up and chain him inside of the house and don't let him go out. That'll be the fulfillment of l'man yenu hashav v'chamarecha. No, this is a rest. This is painful. But that is a biological being tied up on Shabbos. For him, is tsar. Ten lo nayich. What do the secular Jews say? It's a tsar. Ten lo nayich. We'll smoke on Shabbos. We'll take a car. We'll go for a picnic. We'll go to the beach in Tel Aviv. Ten lo nayich. This is our menucha. What? Yachmishenu bebeisa. We should be tied up in the house. And this sharcha v'chamarcha, everybody has. He hears it constantly. Wherever he opens a newspaper, he sees it. They know how to make it very glossy, very glamorous. The youth today are under such trials and tribulations that we didn't know what it is in our day. Inundated with it, to the extent that he, in his own personality, has a sharcha v'chamarcha. He himself has a shar v'chamar that cries out and screams, Ten lo nayich. Yichbeshenu bebeisai? No, because tied up at home, that's tsar. Shabbos is the tsar. Shabbos is a beautiful day. Kadosh Baruch Hu was closer. We're wrapped with the Shekhinah. We should feel the joy of being close to our real father and mother. The safety, shelter, security. Shabbos ends, we should be broken and sad. But we have to feel Shabbos. We have to understand what the Shabbos Malk is. And we have to teach this to children. And even if children don't understand it, but we should at least encourage them for every good thing that they do, that they're victorious over the enemy. It's Napoleon 10 times over. Alexander the Great, extol them, praise them, because they deserve the praise. They're great people. There'll be other situations where the impediments and obstacles will be too great to overcome. Makes no difference. As long as they have that burning desire that one day I will be a spiritual person. I want to be a spiritual person, and I have to be a spiritual person because HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted that potential in me, and that is the purpose why I came to this world. If he has that, he'll succeed, and regardless of what the percentage of his success is, it's a tremendous success. Our problem educationally is we do not respond, or we don't respond adequately, because the sharcha v'chamarcha of the street and of the media and everywhere else where we encounter it in the outside secular materialistic world, a world of hedonei, a world of pursuing pleasure, a world that's rebelling against all authority, that they want to play God, they want to replace God, they want to say what morality is, and their code of morality is total immorality. Hitler made a code of morality too. That was the greatest immorality of all time. This is something which this message must somehow or other reach the youth. In addition, we have to know what the Gemara tells us and what the Chazal tell us. First and foremost, the educational process has to be, even though it might be something which is above them intellectually, but they have to know if you succumb to the world of pleasures and desires, etc. So if you think you're going to fulfill your drive, your urge, you have a very bad mistake. It will not be satiated, but it will be much worse than it was before. If you give in, you surrender, it's like if similar, and it's really a similarity. If you're thirsty, the first thing not to do is drink salt water, because the salt water will only increase your thirst and you'll be more thirsty. Surrender is as if you're drinking salt water, you'll become even more thirsty. In Yiddish, the word is geschmack. A child that gets a geschmack in feeling that he accomplished something, so it's surely going to be a tremendous spiritual property that he achieves. We don't want to speak about this at great length, but there's countless stories that point out that these are the two most important aspects of Jewish education, and it's something that the parents are responsible for, as well as the educators. This is what we came to the conclusion would have been the response had it not been so sudden. This person Erica was simply overwhelmed. And when we discussed it, so it was already after the shock. This is more or less the message that has to be given. There has to be a response by us against the society of Sharcha v'Chamarecha that now has become part of every individual. In conclusion, we heard from Ziknei Chasidei Ger, Ziknei Chasidim of Gur, over 50 years ago, But they still remember it in their youth. That there was an almana, a very bitter almana, that died, and she was sick for a little bit of time beforehand. And the Rav of Yerushalayim, the famous Rav Shmuel Salant, asked people that to inform him if she passes away and there'll be a levaya, to tell him immediately, because he wants to say a hesped. I was surprised. This was an isolated, lonely almana. Rav Shmuel Salant, the Gadol Hador, wants to say a hesped. So anyway, she died, unfortunately, and Rav Shmuel Salant said a hesped. And he said that this woman was Megan on half of Yerushalayim. That's why I'm here. She really does not belong in Yerushalayim Shel Mato, doesn't belong here. She comes from Yerushalayim Shel Malo, from a different place entirely. And the reason I came is very simple, because a while back, I was going to a bris, the old city, and I passed by the chotzer where she was living. In those times, people did not have houses that, so to speak, pointed to a big yard. And I had to walk by the yard, and she saw me, and she said, Rebbe, can you please come in? And he came. He knew about her, of course, and she was a very embittered almana. She had no one in the world, absolutely no one. She came originally from America with her husband many years ago because she didn't have children, and she thought here in Eretz Yisrael, coming to live in Eretz Yisrael, so she'll have the stula of Eretz Yisrael, the great treasure of Eretz Yisrael, and through that she'll be zeichet to children. Unfortunately, she was not zeichet to children. And in her old age, she was paralyzed from the waist down. No money whatsoever. The neighbors of the adjacent courtyards got together to the best of their ability. There was tremendous poverty in the 30s. And they got together. The most money they could scrape up was to give her some food. And once a week, a woman would come in and wash her. That was the most they could do. The rest of the time, unfortunately, since she was paralyzed from the waist down, so she was in a very uncomfortable position. So she called Rabbi Yisrael Salant, Shmuel Salant, and she said, Rebbe, give me a bracha for Arichas Yomim. So Shmuel Salant was amazed. And perhaps he should not have asked her, but he asked her, what does a person like you want to do with Arichas Yomim? You're totally encompassed in a bitter situation, a real bitter situation. He cried when he saw her. He said by the husband. So she said, she doesn't understand. Right? Once a week they wash her up. All week long, she can't say brachas, she can't say some psukim and shir hashirim, or say tillim, so she waits breathlessly, anxiously, for the woman to come in that once a week, Erev Shabbos, wash her up, and for an hour, 2 hours, that she's clean, so she has the ability to say brachas, and she can say a few psukim of tillim, and Baruch Hashem, she's profiting. If she has a Arichas Yomim, she'll profit even more. So Shmuel Salant broke down. Said he didn't know that Yerushalayim has such great individuals, and a broken woman in body, crushed from every single side, should have such a seichel to want Arichas Yomim, so she could do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu again the next week for a few hours. So this is surreal. This is simply overwhelming. That's why I came to the Levaya. She was Megan for half of Yerushalayim. We all now have to make sure that we do tshuva to fill this great void.